Hello, and welcome to the National World War II Museum's podcast series, Service on Celluloid. This is our mini-episode, where I will answer comments and questions from the previous episode, as well as provide you, the listener, with oral histories from those who were there. My name is Seth Paradin, historian and digital content manager here at the National World War II Museum. And today we'll be continuing our discussion on the 1946 film, The Best Years of Our Lives, directed by William Wyler. The film is set around the story of three United States servicemen returning from World War II and attempting to readjust to civilian life. The film stars Myrna Loy, Frederick March, Dana Andrews, Teresa Wright, Virginia Mayo, and Harold Russell. The movie won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Best Years of Our Lives was a huge commercial and critical success in both the United States and abroad. It became the highest-grossing film and most attended film in both the United States and the United Kingdom, selling approximately 55 million tickets in the United States alone. It remains the 6th most attended film of all time in the United Kingdom. The main theme of the movie is the readjusting period of American servicemen coming home from overseas during World War II. All three of the main characters, Dana Andrews, Frederick March, and Harold Russell, are all they all portray combat veterans from various service branches and theaters. Of course, Dana Andrews is a bombardier in the 8th Air Force who served, apparently, according to the movie, from all the way from 1943 until the end of the war. And Harold Russell is the gentleman who lost his hands when his aircraft carrier was sunk in the Pacific, supposedly in the Philippines. And Frederick March plays a grizzled sergeant, infantry sergeant in the 25th Infantry Division, the Tropic Lightning Division, that in actuality saw a great deal of combat in the Pacific War. And it's alluded that he got in the 25th in the beginning and stayed all the way through the end of the war. So the three of them saw a great deal of combat in their time in the service. And one of the popular images of World War II is that the soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen and Coast Guardsmen and what have you, is that they came home from the war, they put their uniforms away, and they went to work and they built America right after the war. The images of the immediate post-war years were very affluent, fueled by young working and middle class eager to get on with their lives as if the war had never happened. World War II ended in 1945, and you got 46, 47, 48, 49, and you go right into the fabulous 50s, which propelled the United States in the world stratosphere. On the center stage with the U.S.'s main actors or players being those who returned from the, quote, good war, unquote, unscathed both physically and emotionally, ready to take on the world. Smiling wives, husbands, 2 children, white picket fences, apple pie, and the whole deal. But that historically, in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. The vast majority of veterans then, just as now, simply could not forget the war and could not move on like Fred Derry in the movie his soon-to-be ex-wife Marie tells him to do in The Best Years of Our Lives. When he couldn't shake the memories of the war, she tells him to just forget it and move on, and it's not that easy. The portrayal of the returning veterans in Best Years of Our Lives is incredibly accurate, in my opinion. Near the beginning of the film, you see our 3 stars struggle in their own ways to physically get out of the cab and walk into their homes, scared, frightened at what they may encounter in this new, to them, strange world where people aren't supposed to kill Japanese in hand-to-hand combat or bomb German cities from 25,000 feet or try to swim away from their sinking aircraft carrier without hands. This is accurate in that the world that was known to the returning combat veteran, the world of a daily struggle to survive, struggle to simply breathe for another day, was gone for them. They were entering a new world, one of peace and tranquility, or it was supposed to be. The home that they intensely dreamt of when they were overseas was now like a combat objective, something to be feared. And that put a strain on marriages. There were a lot of marriages during the war. There were a lot of marriages immediately after the war. There were a lot of marriages before the war. And that's another popular image of the World War II generation, is that the returning veteran from World War II is, Johnny comes home, he's married Susie, and he's finally living with Susie now after having married her and after knowing her for 2 weeks in 1942, and that they live happily ever after, that they have the 2 kids and a picket fence, like I said earlier. But again, that was not the case. The divorce, the ending of a marriage, was taboo. It was a subject that was not really discussed very often in the 1940s and 50s. Those who were divorcees were supposedly shunned, especially women, unfairly. It's seen all over TV in the 50s and in movies from the era. It was shown to be a rare event, something that only happened to the less than virtuous or drunks. But the reality is that in 1946, the United States had the highest divorce rate in its history in 1946. The pre-war divorce rate doubled. Some courts in American cities were swamped with divorce petitions, so much so that they actually outnumbered issued marriage licenses. The divorce rate for veterans was twice as high as those who had not served. An estimated 500,000 marriages would dissolve in 1945 alone. 31 failed marriages for every 100 so-called successful marriages. And of course, that's not factoring in, those people that got divorced in 1948 and 50 and so on and so on and so on. Quickie wartime marriages were certainly the majority of those breakups, but there were an alarming amount of pre-war marriages that broke up as well. Adultery, alcoholism, home violence, and irreconcilable differences were the reported major causes for breakups. The man that left to go overseas was not the same man that often came home in 1945 and 46. The trauma of combat irrevocably changed the men who came home, and they would never be the same. One veteran we need to hear from is a gentleman named Francis Resta. Mr. Resta is a veteran of the United States Army's 102nd Infantry Division, and he saw intensive combat later in the war in Europe on the Western Front, particularly around the Siegfried Line, around the German border and into Germany. And he is very upfront with having to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder his entire life. He's actually written a couple of books about it, about how to deal with it and how he's dealt with it over his life. And again, this is one of those guys where you listen to him and you can hear it in his voice. You can hear the pain in his voice, and he goes into descriptions, pretty good descriptions about the nightmares and the flashbacks that he dealt with, and how until he realized that it wasn't normal to have nightmares like he was having, he thought it was okay to have those kind of dreams and those thoughts and those ever-present demons. And it's a very profound oral history. So we're going to hear from Mr. Resta now.
Combat veterans are a problem, primarily to themselves, because like myself, I knew there were rules and laws. My father, when I got home, spent from March until September, when I went to college, every minute of his free time, evenings, weekends, for that whole 7-month, whatever period, talking to me. He had been in World War I in an infantry division, and so he had some experience on what veterans coming home were like. And he probably gave me my life. Most of my buddies that I went to visit were really lost souls. They were having trouble with drinking, they were having trouble with keeping out of trouble. And so they were pretty much lost souls. And I think I was not, primarily because of all that time my dad spent with me. So I'm very grateful for that. For me, it was particularly poignant because I think I felt I didn't really have a family until Company B, and that was my real family. And when I started losing my buddies, it was hard. I was losing my family. Well, when we took Geilenkirchen, or were in it, the 406 actually took Geilenkirchen. We were attacking one side. We got into town. It was door-to-door fighting. Germans were up on the flat roofs and second stories, and I had what was what the therapist called a reverse flashback for many years. As I was going to sleep, at one point, my sweetheart happened to ask me what I thought about when I was falling asleep. And I thought it was pretty normal to share, and told her I was killing Germans every night for 30 years. I had been on a rooftop, two scenarios. I was on a rooftop shooting Germans in the streets below, which reversed my flashback. And the second scenario was also a reverse, where I would have my own private Siegfried line with all the pillboxes of machine gun and artillery cannon and tunnels between them, and I would run from one to the next and just mow the Germans down. And when I looked at her and saw the utter dismay on her face, it dawned on me that that wasn't really normal. And what I did, the therapists call substitution, which they use for PTSD, I started deliberately thinking about her face as I was going to sleep. And my mother and my sister. And whenever I would start to go into that reverse flashback, I would deliberately think about a face with smiles. And that worked. That substituted, so I wasn't killing Germans every night after that.
It's another popular view, especially today, that civilians in the United States were also victims of the war. And while there is no doubt that those who lost loved ones, be they brothers, sons, mothers, fathers, whatever, they were victims of the war. There's no disputing that. But the average civilian in the United States was not a victim of the war. Not even close when compared to the civilians in England or Germany or Japan or Russia or Soviet Union, rather. We weren't, and we're very blessed for that, to have not been directly bombed by the Japanese in the United States, with the exception of one small time in Oregon and California, or the Germans on the eastern coast of the United States. That never happened, so we're very, very lucky to have not experienced that. But the average U.S. combat veteran did. And while the majority of U.S. civilians were inconvenienced at the unavailability of meat or butter, or had to make do with a small gas ration, and they couldn't go to the store whenever they wanted to because they didn't have the gas, there were really no American civilians that experienced what the servicemen on the front line did in any way, shape, or form. Citizens in the heartland of America did not have to hold their dying comrade in their arms as they cried out for their mothers. They didn't have to kill an enemy soldier with their bare hands in a muddy foxhole somewhere on Peleliu. There was simply no way on earth those same civilians could relate to the returning combat veteran. Traumatic memories simply don't die and fade away. They stick with you forever. In my nearly 14 years here at the museum, I've come to know a multitude of World War II combat veterans, many of them very, very well. In particular, I think of one guy who was a friend of mine here, and he was a very popular guy here at the museum. He was a volunteer, and obviously a World War II veteran. His name was John James Witmeyer, Jr., and we called him JJ. He was a great guy. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, as a lot of World War II veterans are. He was a New Orleans native, and he spent a great deal of time here at the museum. He was a fixture in the Louisiana Memorial Pavilion. You'd see him there every week, multiple times, and he always had a smile or a whack at you with his cane, friendly whack. But he was a fantastic guy, and when he joined the Army in 1942, he was an ordinary guy. He went into the service as just a regular Joe. He was a New Orleans Catholic boy who went to Catholic school, or actually didn't go to Catholic school. He went to public school. My fault. But he was a regular average kid, and he deployed to Europe right after D-Day with the 79th Infantry Division, and he was a rifleman. Actually, he was a platoon sergeant at that time when he went into Normandy. And in this little clip that we're going to hear, he notes the drastic change in his personality as the violence of the war beat on him for years after the war. All that violence that he saw and that he participated in, the rage and fury didn't end when the war did. He carried it with him forever, and people who didn't experience infantry combat could never relate to how he was feeling or why he thought about things the way he did. So let's listen to JJ and see what he's got to say.
And when they had a problem with a prisoner or something, they would get that fellow Witmeyer, and I'd go over there and persuade them to talk or whatever they were trying to do. Persuade them to listen or persuade them to die. And then I'd sit by them if need be and eat my chocolate bar. It's just plain meanness. Where it come from, I don't know. But I carried some of that back out. The Boulders don't know it. My wife died without knowing. I used to go many times at night. I'd go at Gordon and 7th and sit in the automobile because I couldn't stand to be around people. I was afraid to be around people. And that's what these guys are talking about, PTSD. But guys come back and get in a fight, you want to kill a guy. You really do. You didn't care if you kicked him or anything. It wasn't what you wanted to do, it was what came out of you. And if they'd asked if they had asked me, what did I learn in the military? I learned a bunch of ways to kill people. Now, who wants somebody can do that? And so that's terrible. It's terrible to talk about. It's hard even to talk about. I feel the heaviness in my chest, and I got a headache. But and it gets worse than that. It gets worse than that. If an artillery shell, a tank, anything else fires into a building and it begins to burn, no matter how much it burns, the more the better. The soldiers that stand up and applaud almost jump up with glee. They're so glad to see that thing burn. So what I'm saying, it's such a contrast between what you do in watching a fire burn in civilian life and watching one burn in a combat area. It's the same when people shoot one another. If there's an attack and you beat off a counterattack, let's say, and these fellows can see you and you see them firing on Germans and them folding over and falling on the ground, and then suddenly they're all gone. They retreated. You killed off the patrol or whatever it might be. People are clapping and slapping one another on the back like, look what we accomplished. And what did they accomplish? And you think about, you were happy to see people die, happy to see people killed, and you didn't. That was completely different. And so when you try to tell a story about an experience in a war, and you tell people that you killed someone 18 inches from you, or 5 feet, or 10 feet, or 100 yards, people, you can't make them understand that. It seems so cruel, and it is cruel, and it is a waste, and people never stop to think, wonder if he had a wife and kids. You only think about your buddy when he gets killed. You think about his wife and kids, but you don't think about the enemy in the same thought.
JJ, as I said, he entered combat in Normandy in 1944, and when he went into combat, he was just a regular average Joe. And there was this one episode in particular that changed him forever. It was when one of his favorite people, one of his favorite soldiers, was killed in action. And this was a story that easily, if you knew him, like anybody around here did, you knew, and he actually told you his stories, which he didn't tell to everybody. you could tell, and it was very obvious, this was the one that was the most personal to him, and this is the one that changed him more than anything else. It was easily his most painful story, and it happened to him, this event happened to him right after he got into combat, and it gives you a really good inside view as to why he was affected by the things that he was for the rest of his life.
But a couple of days before that, a machine gun had wreaked havoc on my people, lost a lot of people, and so I decided, I better do something about it. And I had a little fellow named Ferriola who was from New York, and he was, I took care of him like he was my son. I really took good care of him. I said, I'm going to go over this wall. So I took this Ferriola by the hand, and I got up on the wall, and I pulled him up on the wall. And the other two guys apparently stood up. They probably weren't on the wall, but they did stand up. And that machine gun cut loose, and it hit this boy through the neck, right in its V. I was sitting on the ground and had him cradled in my arms, and he was squirting blood all over me. And he died. And at that time, I changed. I know that's where I changed from. First, I had to change from a civilian to a soldier, and they did that in training. Then I had to change from a soldier to a killer, which is what you were there for in the first place. After that, I became inhuman. I could punch him. I did. I punched prisoners. I stuck bayonets through the neck. As close as you are, if I haven't killed 10 people that close, then I didn't do none. I'm talking about close. I'm not talking about throwing a hand grenade, This close, this close. German officer get up in his foxhole. My Tommy gun and put 4 or 5 rounds in him. I'm not going to interrogate him, ask him if he's got kids. I frankly don't care. It's true. It's true. And you laughed at me, that was death for you. If you were German and you laugh, I'd say, what are you laughing at? I'd shoot him in the head. Not nice. It's atrocity. It's true.
That one episode obviously changed J.J. forever. The following instances of combat, loss, and the taking of enemy lives simply compounded the emotional struggles that he dealt with for the remainder of his life. J.J. Witmeyer is a perfect example of the returning combat veteran. He's a perfect example of what combat does to the human psyche. Things that he experienced a lifetime ago, sometimes for only an instant, a flash, shaped how he looked at and dealt with life until the end of his days. He was a great man, a soldier's soldier, a good friend, and he is missed by all who knew him. So in closing, I have to say I can't recommend Best Years of Our Lives enough. It's an absolutely phenomenal film. It's a moving film. It's a heartbreaking film. It's an extremely important film, just as it was in 1946. It's just as important today, and frankly, maybe even more so. A lot of younger people don't know about older movies, and in other podcasts, we talk about teaching tools, and this movie this could be used as a teaching tool, frankly. It's a fantastic film, and anyone who hasn't seen it, I highly recommend it. And you will not be disappointed. And frankly, you will probably be changed for the rest of your life after having seen this movie. Thanks so much for listening. Tune in next week where we discuss the 1998 blockbuster, Saving Private Ryan. If you'd like to listen to the complete oral histories you heard today, please visit our digital collections at www.2online.org. That's www.2online.org. I'd like to thank everyone who made this podcast possible. Our producer, Tessa Jager, and our sound engineer, Jeremy Burson. This has been a production of the National World War II Museum.